Here's a disturbing fact that most people don't know: when you're part of a group, in crowds, deindividuation occurs when personal self-awareness diminishes and group norms take over. This psychological phenomenon happens automatically and can lead to both incredible acts of generosity and terrifying displays of violence. The scariest part: you probably won't even realize it's happening to you. Researchers have identified that anonymity, group size, and emotional arousal work together to reduce our self-awareness, creating this powerful shift in behavior. But understanding how these forces operate can help you maintain your authentic self even when surrounded by others. The question is, how much do you really know about who you become when others are watching? This video will be going through 4 main points to answer this. Most people believe they remain the same person regardless of who's around them, but science reveals a shocking truth about our malleable identity. Social identity theory shows we carry different group-based selves that guide our behavior in different contexts. This psychological phenomenon demonstrates that we don't have just one fixed self waiting to be discovered. Instead, we carry several different identities that emerge based on the groups we find ourselves in. Think about how you behave at your workplace compared to hanging out with your family or cheering at a sports game. The differences aren't just surface-level adjustments in your mannerisms. Your brain actually shifts between distinct versions of who you are, complete with different values, priorities, and moral standards. This transformation happens without conscious awareness, making it one of the most unsettling aspects of human psychology. In classic experiments, reminding participants of their group membership led them to change ethical judgments within minutes. Psychologists observe quick shifts in moral judgments when group identity is emphasized, revealing how rapidly our core beliefs can transform when group identity shifts. The underlying cognitive shifts behind this phenomenon work through processes that activate within seconds of joining a group. Your nervous system syncs with the group before your conscious mind realizes what's happening, creating an automatic tendency to mirror the behaviors, expressions, and even thought patterns of those around you. This process can override your personal moral compass and deeply held beliefs in ways that might surprise you. When positive group dynamics take hold, people show increased empathy, cooperation, and willingness to help strangers. They become more generous, more creative, and more willing to take risks for the benefit of others. However, the same mechanism can lead to adopting prejudices you normally reject, supporting decisions that contradict your individual values, or participating in behaviors you would typically find unacceptable. The concerning reality is that most people remain completely unaware of these identity shifts. They genuinely believe they're acting according to their authentic self when they're actually responding to invisible group pressures. Understanding social identity theory helps us recognize when our authentic self is being influenced by group dynamics. But what happens when this identity shift goes even further and individual awareness fades completely? This extreme transformation leads to a psychological state where your personal identity doesn't just change, it completely dissolves, and you might not even notice it happening. This phenomenon, called deindividuation, occurs when personal identity fades and group identity takes complete control of our actions. Your individual self-awareness diminishes while the group's influence grows stronger, creating a mental state where you lose track of your personal boundaries and moral guidelines. Most people assume this dissolution of individual identity always leads to negative outcomes, but research reveals a more complex reality. Deindividuation can produce both destructive mob behavior and beautiful acts of collective kindness. The key lies not in the psychological process itself, but in the values and norms of the specific group experiencing it. Studies of emergencies and rallies show participants supporting one another in ways that individual action rarely matches. Volunteer groups working together during disasters frequently demonstrate extraordinary selflessness, with individuals contributing far beyond what they might offer alone. Research identifies anonymity, large crowd size, and heightened emotions as key factors that lower self-awareness and elevate group influence. The dark side of this process appears throughout history in riots, lynchings, and other collective violence. Studies show that larger crowds tend to produce more extreme behaviors. Historical analyses revealed that the more people present in violent mobs, the more brutal their actions became. Similarly, research on threatened suicides found that bigger crowds were more likely to engage in crowd baiting, actually encouraging people to jump. The crucial insight emerges when we examine why the same psychological process produces such different outcomes. Reduced self-awareness shifts our attention from personal moral standards to whatever norms exist within our immediate group. For example, participants dressed as nurses under deindividuation conditions gave gentler shocks than those in KKK-like robes, showing group norms steer behavior. A crowd of deindividuated individuals will not become violent unless a norm of violence gets established within that group. Conversely, groups with strong pro-social norms can inspire remarkable acts of cooperation and compassion. Deindividuation isn't inherently good or bad, it amplifies whatever values the group holds. But what happens when groups face situations requiring individual action, yet everyone assumes someone else will step forward? This collective assumption creates a dangerous vacuum where individual responsibility evaporates entirely. In 1964, early reports claimed 38 witnesses did nothing while Kitty Genovese was murdered, although later analysis found some tried to help or assumed others had called authorities. This correction highlights a deeper psychological truth about how we behave in groups during emergencies. Darley and Latané's experiments then showed that as the number of witnesses rises, individual responsibility drops sharply. The bystander effect represents a counterintuitive phenomenon where more witnesses to an emergency actually decreases the likelihood that anyone will help. This psychological process challenges our assumptions about human nature and collective responsibility. The presence of other people fundamentally changes how our brain calculates our individual obligation to act, creating conditions where everyone assumes someone else will step forward. This isn't about people being cruel or uncaring, but about a psychological process called diffusion of responsibility that happens automatically in groups. When you're alone and witness an emergency, the responsibility falls entirely on your shoulders. However, when others are present, your brain divides that responsibility among everyone present, reducing your personal sense of urgency and obligation to act. Their research demonstrated how helping behavior drops dramatically as group size increases. This diffusion effect creates a psychological environment where everyone waits for someone else to take action, often resulting in no action at all. Because bystanders look to each other for cues, everyone waits for someone else to act, and no one does, plausible whether you're in a city street or boardroom. This dynamic appears regularly in workplace environments where important problems go unaddressed because everyone assumes someone else will handle them. Critical issues get overlooked or remain unresolved, impacting productivity and potentially creating safety hazards, when the assumption that others will take action results in collective failure to address problems effectively. Practical strategies for overcoming the bystander effect include assigning specific responsibility and recognizing when diffusion is happening. Designating particular individuals to take action or explicitly acknowledging the need for intervention increases the likelihood of helping behavior and breaks the cycle of collective inaction. Yet the same psychological forces that prevent people from acting can also push groups toward making decisions that individual members would never support on their own. This dynamic reveals how smart groups consistently arrive at terrible decisions despite having access to brilliant individual minds. Some of history's most catastrophic decisions were made by groups of highly intelligent, well-meaning people who somehow convinced themselves that obviously bad ideas were brilliant. This phenomenon, known as groupthink, occurs when the desire for group harmony overrides realistic evaluation of alternatives and critical thinking. Irving Janis coined this term in 1971 to describe how well-intentioned groups make poor decisions due to pressures to conform or the belief that dissent is impossible within the group. Janis identified high cohesion, isolation from dissenting views, strong leader bias, and stress as the perfect storm for groupthink. The same psychological forces that create positive group cohesion become dangerous when they suppress dissent and doubt. Loyalty, consensus, and shared identity strengthen groups under normal circumstances, but these qualities can blind members to obvious flaws in their reasoning. Groups prioritizing their identity and treating outsiders coldly become more susceptible to this trap, creating an environment where questioning the group's direction feels like betrayal. The Bay of Pigs invasion stands as a prime example of groupthink in action. President Kennedy's advisors, despite their intelligence and experience, ignored obvious warning signs to maintain group unity. Similarly, the Challenger disaster resulted from engineers' concerns being dismissed, despite repeated safety warnings to preserve organizational harmony. These situations demonstrate how smart people can rationalize poor decisions when group pressure overrides individual judgment. Just as we crave belonging under social identity theory, and lose self-awareness under deindividuation, in groupthink our loyalty silences critical voices, showing these psychological forces interconnect. Warning signs appear in workplace meetings where dissent is discouraged, social groups that become echo chambers, and family dynamics that avoid difficult conversations. Practical strategies for preventing groupthink include appointing devil's advocates to challenge consensus, seeking outside perspectives before finalizing decisions, and creating psychological safety for disagreement. The same group psychology that can lead us astray can be harnessed for better decision-making when we understand these forces operating around us every day. These psychological patterns influence your choices in countless ways throughout each day. Group psychology isn't something that happens to other people in extreme situations, it's constantly shaping our behavior in subtle ways throughout our daily lives. From family dinners where you automatically adjust your opinions to fit the mood, to work meetings where you stay quiet despite having different ideas, to social media interactions where algorithms amplify group thinking patterns. These invisible forces operate without your conscious awareness. Start observing your own behavior in different group contexts. Notice when you feel pressure to conform and practice maintaining your authentic self while still benefiting from positive group connections. Tonight, notice one moment you feel pulled by a group norm, then pause and choose which values to honor. Practicing this builds your self-awareness muscle over time. Understanding anonymity, bystander diffusion, and groupthink equips you to stay authentic in any crowd setting. If you found these insights helpful, let us know in the comments how you've navigated group pressures, and don't forget to subscribe for more practical psychology tips.